Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
I will be brief today. Public housing, poor folks, welfare, drugs, undesirable communities. Those are the images and the words that are evoked when we talk about housing sometimes. Some of it's real, some of it's perceived. But in order for us to come together as a community, we have to be able to rethink housing. In order for us to achieve who we are as a community, as our great potential that we have to be able to rethink housing. Words matter. We have to be able to change our vernacular. We don't no longer have public housing. We don't have tenants. We don't have projects. We don't have Section 8. We don't subsidize families. What we do, we have affordable housing. We have workforce housing. We have senior housing. We have families, communities. We have the opportunity to provide housing choice. Again, we don't subsidize our families. We invest in our families. So we have to change the vernacular. And once we're able to create an opportunity for us to shift how we view things, then there's a relatable opportunity in which we all can come together and talk about affordable housing and be able to rethink housing today. You start by rethinking housing by really talking about our families. Right now we serve close to 13,000 people across the parish, including the city of Iberville. I'm sorry, the city of Plaquemine. We serve also 5,400 families through our housing choice vouchers. We have 913 families that live in our 13 communities. We serve three distinct populations: our working families, our elderly families, and our disabled families. Most notably, 800 of our children also reside in our housing communities, which is also part of our focus. Now, I'm going to show you a little fact. 67% of our families are working families. Again, we have to rethink about who our families are because most people automatically assume that our families are stay at home, have babies, don't do anything. But our families are the working poor. They're our low-wage earners. And so what we do, we create opportunities. Let me show you a little bit about their finances. The average monthly income for our families is $1,300. The average rent in Baton Rouge is $1,000. The average two-bedroom rent, $650. So what we do at the Housing Authority, we provide access by closing the gap between what they should be paying and what the market rate pays, and that's the difference. We help and provide access to our families to reduce the unaffordability. This is very key because ultimately this slide is very important because ultimately it talks about the institutional problem that we actually inherited, and that's the public housing system. And I'll declare to you today the public housing system is a broken system. 80 years old, and ultimately what it did, it warehoused poor people, isolated from the resources that they needed. And so ultimately, right now our portfolio ages from 1940s to the 1970s, functionally obsolete in many cases, in various states of disrepair. And so we have to come up with a solution. And that solution is to put our families in better positions of opportunity. And so what can we do? One, we create an end game. We have to be able to show our families that they can live in opportunities to where they're resilient communities, sustainable communities, and high opportunity areas. And so if you look at where our properties currently sit, our communities probably sit, most of them are isolated from the things that they need. And so our solution is to come up with a repositioning strategy that allow us to recreate communities and invest in communities over the next 5 to 10 years, totaling $250 million. Now that's the value proposition because we're not asking this community to pay for that. We're using public-private partnerships to bridge that gap with that funding. We are attracting external capital here to Baton Rouge so we can make better communities. But there's the other side to that. It's just not about the physical or built environment that we have. We're not only the transformation of those physical environments, we're about the transformation of our families. And how do we do that? If you have any conversation around the table, one of the greatest barriers to the American dream is access. Access to capital, access to transportation, access to great jobs, right? So in 2019, EBRPHA launched this transformation strategy called Access, which leverages its housing opportunities to create greater access and resources and outcomes to education, economic opportunities, and health and wellness. I'll say that one more time. Education, economic opportunities, and health and wellness. We believe if we can substantively address those key things, then we combat poverty. Because ultimately that's what we're combating, right? We're fighting poverty. And those three things assist in us fighting poverty. So how do we do that? We view the Housing Authority as a docking station. And so what you see represented in that graphic are all of those partners. And I didn't mean to slight any partner, but it would have become very, very difficult to list all the partners that we have. But this is a very good example of the partners that we have. The City of Baton Rouge, YWCA, East Baton Rouge Parish Schools, the Baton Rouge Area Foundation, Louisiana Housing Corporation. All of these individuals, all these organizations plug into the Housing Authority to our families to provide those resources. Because the access transformation strategy cannot be executed by the Housing Authority alone. We must support it with partners. It is a partner-driven solution. We surround our families with all of these partners because in many cases they're already serving these families. So now there is a central location, a central place in which your organizations, whatever that may be, can come to the Housing Authority and reach our families. That is the opportunity that we have with access. And here is just simply put. As we combat poverty, our number one goal is to have our families move up and out. We undergird them with health and wellness, both mental and physical. We start with education because education combats poverty. It's the pathway out of poverty. Once you have the education and properly educated, then you are afforded access to those economic opportunities, right? Does that make sense to everybody? Absolutely. Great. So then you ask, well, Jay, give me an example of access and how we can come together as a community. I show you one right here with our Choice Neighborhoods grant. If you go back to the slide where we had all our partners, that partnership wheel and that docking station is representative of the partnerships that we presented to HUD 2 years ago when we successfully secured $30 million for our grant. Bringing the partners to the table to show that this community is invested in Baton Rouge, invested in the families. And so what you have here is just a representation of that. How do we combat poverty? Education. So we created an educational spine. What you see represented here is Lobdell over to your right. The center spine is Ardenwood Drive. The northern boundary is Greenwell Springs. Through the commitment, through the mayor and the MOVE EBR, which this entire community voted for, the mayor committed to constructing a connector road. The connecting road starts at the McKay Automotive Technology Center. Remember, we're talking about education and economic opportunities, right? And then EBR Schools constructed and developed the CTEC, the Career Technical Education Center, another educational asset. And off the success of those two institutions, they then built a collision center, furthering that educational aspect. So now we have the opportunity to connect those assets to Ardendale Drive. What sits at the corner of Ardendale Drive, or Will? The YWCA. What does that mean? Early childhood education, Women's Resource Center, right? Things that we need as a community. And so right across the street from the YWCA, we have what? 400 new homes for that community. And then that street is then connected to Capitol Middle School, Melrose Elementary. What we created here is an education center, an educational spine that whether you are a female looking for workforce development opportunities, whether you're a student looking to further education, you can do it right here in this community. a holistic approach to community revitalization, sustainable, resilient communities. Okay, let's talk about ecosystems. Perfect example. Cypress Pinchback, 99 units, senior development. After the flood, the state, along with others, identified our senior population as our most vulnerable population. And so look what we've done here. We have created a $24 million senior community. Sponsored by EBRPHA and Partner Southeast, which is the development arm of the Housing Authority. How do we make that work? Well, we bring in architects, right? Coleman Partners is our architect. Again, one thing, we have a philosophy within the Housing Authority. Things that we develop, things that we build, doesn't look like affordable housing. When you drive by it, it's indistinguishable from any other market rate product that's out there. Because sometimes when people build affordable housing, you can tell, you can drive by, it looks horrible, it doesn't look good. And right there, you've stigmatized families that live there. Our design philosophy means that it will look like any other market rate property that you see. And our partners understand that, from our architects into the quality of our general contractors as well, which we have represented here. We have Steve Carville from Womack Construction and his joint venture partner with Norisha Kurtz. They are joint venture partners. Coleman Partners, our architect, and again, attracting external dollars through the Louisiana Housing Corporation, Home Bank, which is a local bank, again, keeping dollars here at home, making sure they circulate, Regions Bank, and the Federal Home Loan Bank of Dallas. These are the opportunities that we are creating. These are opportunities we're creating. And we're going to do this over and over and over again, attracting external capital to this region. We also have to be mindful of our health and wellness. We have to be able to function in this world. COVID really highlighted some vulnerabilities that we have within our system. And so we took an effective approach to how we're going to attract health and wellness assets for our families. A perfect example, Beds for Kids. We had a maintenance man come in and said that he wanted to do a service project. And I was like, help me understand that. He went into a unit and found out that they had kids sleeping on pallets, no beds. And so we said, you know what, we can address this problem. Because if it attracts here, if it lives here, then it lives in other developments, right? And so we found out we had 50 kids portfolio-wide that were sleeping on pallets or makeshift beds. And so we went to our philanthropic community, some of our well-heeled citizens, and our other organizations that came in, and we raised over $25,000 to create beds and buy beds for those families. What does that mean? That means that kid at this point has the ability to go to bed, get 8 hours of sleep, and then go to school and be ready to learn. We talk about educational outcomes. We just helped that kid improve his educational outcome because now he has the ability to get a full night's rest. Little things. This is where empathy intersects execution. We identified a problem, we create a solution, and we execute it. Those are community-driven solutions that we have at the Housing Authority. We did the same thing for beds. Baton Rouge has an infant mortality rate that is twice that of the national average. Sometimes due to SID, and most often due to co-sleeping arrangements, to where the baby exhibits some type of accidental smothering because they are sleeping with their parents in the bed. We save lives because we identified there were 18 families that did not have baby beds for their families. So again, we went back to the community, Junior League of Baton Rouge, granted $5,000 so we can support our families, thereby saving lives. These are the things that we're doing in the community. We're helping moving them up and out. We create opportunities and we tell our families, this is not a permanent solution for you. This is temporary assistance, right? So your job as a family is to move up and out. And we're gonna provide you with all the resources and access that you need to be successful to move up and out. If you see represented in that picture, there's a family, there's a young lady with her daughter. And what we do, we celebrate success in our organization. And so we installed a bell. So when a family comes in and they say, thank you, Housing Authority, thank you for the temporary assistance because we needed it. we install the bell and they come out and they ring their bell. One, to bring everybody out of their office, right? Because we're gonna celebrate this. The second bell is when that family said, I'm done. Thank you. You helped me, you assisted me, and I appreciate that support. Now, the other side of that, now this family has created another opportunity, right? Because there's a family that's waiting on that voucher to use. So we get a twofer on that one, right? Again, constantly promoting the success of our families and giving them opportunity to move up and out. I don't know if you knew that the Housing Authority is probably one of the best tools that you have here inside the parish, and I'm gonna tell you why. We have the ability to attract external investment every year from investors. We talk to them, whether in New York, California, they want to invest in Baton Rouge and Louisiana. We represent that opportunity. Secondly, we are not supported by local taxes. There's no millage associated with our operations. Our operations are supported by the revenue that we generate from the operation of our federal programs, as well as developer fees from our development activities. Secondly, we leverage those opportunities through other public and private partnerships that we have. We are a true economic driver within this parish. We create jobs and we create greater private investment. This is a perfect example. You can't see the bottom of it, but that $36 million is the $36 million that we invest with our 1,200 landlords on an annual basis, every year. Whether you're a small mom and pop shop or whether you own a 300-unit apartment community, we invest $36 million in this Baton Rouge region every year. Secondly, you look at $30 million from our Choice Neighborhoods grant, which is then leveraged to $300 million worth of development that will happen over the next 3 years. And lastly, the $250 million that are going to be invested over the next 5 to 10 years as we reposition our portfolio. Those are numbers. Those are true numbers. That is real investment inside this community. So then you ask, how do we partner? Well, for one thing, start by inviting us to the table. Call us, talk to us. We want to be a part of your organizations. We want to be part of the solutions driven by this community. Advocate for access, advocate for better education, advocate for better economic opportunities, advocate for health and wellness. Lastly, support our capital investments. Whether you're talking to some elected official on a local or state or federal level, tell them the good that we're doing here at the Housing Authority and tell them how we need to be continually supported. Lastly, tell our story. If you like what you've heard today, we appreciate it. Tell someone else. This is a community-driven organization, and we want to be part of it. We're about our families. We're about our communities. We're about investing in this community. And so as you go and leave today and you rethink housing, think about how we transform families. Think about how we transform communities. And that's how we rethink housing. Thank you. Take questions.
Jay will take a couple of questions.
Yes.
So I commend you guys on what you're doing. I think it's fantastic, especially what you're doing for the elderly. But specifically, what are you guys doing to address people that are unhoused, whether temporarily or chronically, or the mentally ill, people who maybe don't have physical handicap or have issues that need to be addressed?
Sure, that's a very good question because we get calls about that all the time. And because we are a housing authority, people automatically ought to us when it comes to housing solutions. So we are a permanent housing provider. There are other organizations that are out there, but their primary purpose is to provide services just as you described. And those are the continuum of care, which is operated from the Louisiana Housing Corporation, in which they are directly plugged into those organizations that address homelessness, that address the mental illness, and other organizations such as that. So even though we don't directly operate in that realm as it relates to temporary housing, but ultimately our job and our hope is that at one point, once they become stabilized, we can then offer them a housing opportunity where they can stay in one of our communities. Yes?
Was one of your earlier slides some of the projects you have already done?
Yes, so are the projects that we are...
Where they are?
Sure. So everyone is familiar with this St. Jude Church on Highland. If you go down Gardere, between the Louisiana Soccer Association and Teakwood Apartments, there's a 5-acre tract in which if you drive down today, you'll see Cypress Pinchback under construction and ready to be delivered in July of 2022. The next one we have, go back, so everyone familiar with the Ardenwood area? All right, good, we can move past that one. And then,
That was the one I was.
there it is. So if you look at the top right-hand corner, that's Northview. That is a property that's directly located from our office. That's 8 units, and that is a alternative use of our parking lot, existing parking lot, where we can create housing opportunities. The second one is on North Boulevard, where we have a property under contract where we'll create close to 300 units, both market rate and low income. The third one is Cypress River Lofts, which is near the water campus located on Oklahoma Street. We're set to break ground on it at the beginning of the year. And then the last picture is represented for our Ardendale redevelopment.
Very good.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about outcomes? So we have Ardenwood and it's this educational spine, and how are those kids doing compared to kids in other places? Or, you know, the programs where we're trying to get them up and be out of poverty, what percentage of
Sure.
families really are ultimately getting out of poverty that go through that?
And that's a great question. And
Not
so,
only the total stats, but is that being measured?
absolutely, and that's part of our Choice Neighborhood Grant, because it's not a factor of just giving an organization money and saying, we hope, right? There has to be measurable outcomes, and that was part of the original grant application. And so we have a human development company that comes in, works with our families, all 93 families that currently are located at Ardenwood Village, and they track the progress. They create life plans for an entire family, and they constantly monitor, they meet on a monthly basis and monitor their progress to ensure a level of success for our families. And hopefully at some point in time, after the end of the grant period, we'll be able to report out those outcomes. Thank you for that. Yes?
You're operating grants at 81% for your revenue. As you continue to invest 250 or get 250 million, do you see the need for grants to depreciate over time and you generate revenue internally from the assets that you own?
Sure. So in affordable housing, there's always a gap. So grants are one of our primary opportunities to really fill those gaps. As we talked about, tell our story and promote our capital investments, the Louisiana Housing Corporation is one of those key organizations that help fill the gap for a lot of our developments, as well as the city of Baton Rouge as well. And so yes, so we like to be a victim of our own success, but at the same time, there will never be a point to where we don't need additional resources for our communities. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I appreciate what you do.
Thank you.
One of the things that I have a big concern about, I have a number of rental properties, and one of them is a sober living house, which is temporary housing.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any affiliation that you have in your organization with sober living arrangements for people with drug addictions, alcohol addiction?
We don't. Obviously, there are many organizations out there that serve that need. As I talked with the gentleman, you know, we deal with permanent supportive housing, right? I'm sorry, permanent housing. But there are other organizations out there that exist that provide those type of resources for those individuals that have those challenges. But I would love to have that conversation to see how we could fully support those organizations as well. Yes.
I frequently hear that we don't have enough vouchers. Talk to me a little bit about how do we have enough housing to support more vouchers? How do we get more vouchers?
Sure.
We have lots of folks who are still not adequately housed.
Sure. So everything's a function of cost, and we operate our federal programs, and Housing Choice is that federal program. I think your voice has been heard, and collectively, if you look at some of the Housing Alliance conversations we've been having with our legislative delegation, we have echoed that same sentiment. We need more money for housing vouchers. Earlier this year, that call was heard, and so in that slide earlier, we had $31 million in Housing Choice voucher allocated to the Housing Authority, and in March, we received an additional $6 million. And so, again, that allowed us to possibly lease an additional 800 units and vouchers for our families. So to your point, we've talked about it, we've talked to our legislative delegation, it was heard, and they sent us an additional $6 million. But you make another good point. There is always going to be a need for affordable housing. Right now, you look at Alfredo Cruz, who works with the Housing Alliance. He's been spearheading a study that talks about the gap that we have here in the parish. And for Alfredo, correct me if I'm wrong, 20,000 units is the estimate right now. And so that is the part, and that's the role that we play as an organization to make sure that we're trying to meet that need for affordable housing. And that's just one tool on the development side. Housing choice vouchers is another tool that we also can continue to advocate for. Thank you. Is that it? All right.
One more.
One more.
One last question.
Hey, Summer.
And thanks for the shout out on CJ.
Of course.
Can you talk a little bit about the areas with the food desert and what y'all are doing to help maybe attract
Sure.
Groceries and fresh food to those
Sure,
areas?
and that's a very good question, because we talk about, retail follow rooftops, right? And so if you look at the critical mass that we're creating in some of these communities, we now become attractive to retailers, right? And so we have to build the critical mass that meets their metrics for them to invest in certain communities. So Ardendale being one of those opportunities, 400 units being, at that point we feel as though we have an opportunity to create a value proposition to a grocer and to a retailer to bring in some of those added food deserts. We also want to work with EBR schools to create one of the first food forests next to Melrose Elementary, which is a 7-acre tract that's on the other side of the school, to where now we can have an opportunity to access to fresh vegetables and fruit on that site that has been typically a forest, right? And so we have an opportunity to create access to health and wellness by creating the first food forest here in Baton Rouge. All right. Is that it? Thank you, everyone. I appreciate you.